Okay, let's take a look at some fun facts about diminished chords. Some of this I'm sure you already know, but just to review, and you might find one or two new things. What is a diminished chord? Well, if I just arbitrarily pick a G, and if I go up in minor thirds, that gives me the four notes. I have a bad habit of saying diminished when I mean diminished 7. So we're talking about diminished 7 chords. These are the notes. So for a G, it's G, B flat, D flat, and F double flat. So in theory, that needs to be called an F, and it's kind of hokey. They call it F double flat, but let's just get real and call it an E, because that's what it is. So it's going to be G, B flat, D flat, and E. Those are the notes. You know this chord, I'm sure. It's a nice voicing on the first 4 strings for G diminished. And as you also know, you can move that chord up, also in minor thirds. And if you do that, you're still playing the same chord. So here's G diminished, here's G diminished, here's G diminished, and here's G diminished. So that's old hat stuff. You also know that for a diminished chord, each of the 4 notes in the chord can be the root. So this is a G diminished based on the first string, but it's also a D flat diminished based on the second string. It's also a B flat diminished based on the third string, and it's also an E or an F double flat. Let's just call it E. There, so each note can be the root of the chord. I learned from Pat Martino on a video years ago that if you take a note in the diminished chord and lower it, let's take that first string, I'm going to lower it down from G to G flat, it's going to give us this chord. That's a G flat 9. Okay? It's going to be a G flat 9. Yeah, let me show you. Yeah, okay. Now, if I take the second string note out of this G diminished, second string would lower from D flat down to C, gives me a nice C7 chord. Back to the parent chord, as Pat called it, G diminished. I'm going to lower my third string note from B flat down to A. I've got an A7. Go back to the parent, G diminished, and we're going to lower the bottom note on the fourth string, that E, down to E flat. That's a nice E flat 7 chord. You know, here's D7. This is E flat 7. Okay. A few days ago, I started thinking, well, what if we took a diminished chord and instead of lowering each note, we raised each note? Here's my G diminished. I'm going to raise the first string. Okay, what that is, if I add a note as the bass root, G flat, it's a G flat 9. So it's this, G flat 7, put the pinky down on the first string, you got G flat 9. So that's, raising that one note out of the diminished gave me a rootless G flat 9. Okay. Let me just show you the picture of what I'm doing. This gives you a rootless G flat 9. But as you can see, it also gives you a B flat minor 7 flat 5, also known as B flat half diminished. And it also gives you a D flat minor 6th. Okay? So let's take a look. The cool thing is if you take the G diminished parent chord, by raising one note, you get 3 brand new chords. G flat 9, B flat minor 7 flat 5, D minor 6, D flat minor 6. Okay. Back to the parent. Raise up that second string, C sharp, up to a D. Well, as you can probably see right off the bat, if I add a C on the bottom, this is actually a rootless C9. If I accentuate the E on the 6th string open, it's also an E minor 7 flat 5. And if I put the G to accentuate, you know, the tonality, it's G minor 6th. What I find interesting, I'm not that good at math, you may have already surmise this yourself. But I took my parent of G diminished. I raised up the second string, arriving at this. If you think of the root notes of each of the three new chords that it leads to, the root notes are C for C9, E for E minor 7 flat 5, and G for G minor 6. That C, E, and G spells out a major triad. I thought it was interesting. Okay? Now, if we go back to our parent, take the third note, take that B flat, raise it up to B natural. Okay? Yeah. That's this one right here. Here's the parent, moving the note up. Okay, doing that gives us a rootless A9. This is a rootless A9. So if I throw the root in, open A, it's A9. Same chord is also a C sharp minor 7 flat 5, C sharp half diminished. Okay, the same chord is also an E minor 6th. So if I accentuate by adding another E, that's in E minor 6th. Back to the parent. Let's raise up that E to an F. That's an E flat 9. Again, when you play the chord this way, it's without the root. It's a rootless E flat 9. But if I add in the E flat, you can hear it. Okay? It's also a G minor 7 flat 5, G half diminished. And it's also B flat minor 6. Okay. So, the nice thing is, if you take your G diminished parent chord, lower one note, you get a dominant 7 chord. By lowering each of the 4 notes in the G diminished, you get 4 dominant 7s. Take that same parent chord, raise each note, you get 4 new sets of 3 chords each. Okay? Let's take a look at the single note version. If I just play a G diminished arpeggio, starting on the 4th string, well, let me grab this C sharp and flat it. Okay, that's this nice C9 little figure. Back to the parent diminished. That's G diminished. Okay, let me lower the 5th here down to the 4th. Gives me a nice E flat 7. Sorry. So this can also lead to you finding new little spots on the fingerboard. Like I never use this for an E flat 7. Give you new ideas. Let's go back to the parent. G diminished. I'm going to lower this 3rd string note, which is a B flat. I'm going to lower it to A. But for ease of playing, I'm going to play the A here. Same note. Okay, so we have that's an A7. So that gives you a nice little A7 arpeggio. But yeah, here's what we identified. Okay, let's go back to the parent. G diminished. And I'm going to lower that 1st note, the 4th string note. You can kind of hear it becoming dominant 7. It's G flat 7. Okay. Yeah, so a couple of other interesting things can come out of this whole thing, basing it on diminished, if I play an E diminished arpeggio, 2 notes per string. Well, let me start that again. Let me start it a third time, going cross-eyed. There it is. Okay, so the pattern here, if you haven't done it, 2 notes per string diminished arpeggio, play a minor third, then you move up a fret, play a minor third, then you move up a fret, play a minor third, move up 1 more fret. Now, because of how the guitar is tuned, it's tuned actually as a major third between the 3rd and 2nd strings. You have to jump here, 2 frets. Let me try that one more time. Doing E to G to start it out. It's a nice symmetrical pattern, just broken again by that 2nd and 3rd string relationship. You have to jump up 2 frets right there. If I use one of the concepts we already used, and if I take this note and lower it, okay, you could think of this thing that we're playing here, our parent. As we said, you can think of this as an E diminished, right? You could also think of it as G diminished, B flat diminished, or D flat diminished. Doesn't really matter. But if you take that pattern, what we're going to do is we're going to flat this note. We're going to flat the C sharp down to C. And if you do that all the way through, you get a nice 2 note per string C dominant 7 arpeggio. Check it out. Okay, so I like that. Just the idea of doing 2 notes per string is fun. I have to work on it more, as you can see. That's it. Okay. Of course, you could do this with other notes. They're not always as playable. But if I take my same, let's just call it G diminished arpeggio, and if I flat that 3rd note in the arpeggio, in the G diminished arpeggio, I get this. It's kind of weird, but it's an A7. That's it. So, what it reminds me of is when you're playing an F7 arpeggio, an A7 arpeggio, you have these notes: C sharp A, G E, C sharp A, G E, etc. But this little thing here, you know, Charlie Christian and then Chuck Berry used to do a lick like. That's like that pattern is reflected in this A7 arpeggio that we found. So here it is. You probably can't really see it that well, but that's the same pattern. It's not the Layla thing, but it's similar. It's raising that note. Yeah, so this on the 4th and 3rd strings is an octave lower version. Let's see what happens if we take the 2nd note in our G diminished arpeggio and flat it. That one's really kind of odd in terms of the finger pattern. But it's a G flat 7. Okay. So hopefully that's maybe a new idea or two for you. Another thing to mention that you probably already know, this is probably the most obvious one. For playing over G7, let's say you're starting a G blues, something that works really nicely is to do an A flat diminished arpeggio. The reason that's the case is because the A flat diminished arpeggio gives you the chord tones of the G7 plus the flat 9. Okay, so the A flat diminished arpeggio works very well. The A flat diminished scale also works well. A nice symmetrical, easy to remember fingering for an A flat 7 to get that sound we were just getting. You can go here. You can go to the 4th string. Okay, so we're starting on the 4th string, 6th fret. I'm doing fingers 1, 3, and 4. Next string is fingers 1, 2, and 4. Second string is fingers 1, 3, and 4. Okay, so hopefully it's helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or additional ideas. Kind of finding the diminished realm kind of interesting and fun and goofy. And if nothing else, it gives us some patterns to break out of, realizing some different chord voicings, some different arpeggio positions, and some different scale usages. Subscribe if you haven't, if you like this kind of stuff. Again, comments and questions. If you found it useful or interesting, please give me a like. And otherwise, keep playing, keep hitting those diminished, and talk to you next time. Have a great day.